Hi. So this week I'm going to be looking at this book, Star, by Yukio Mishima. Really short little book. Um, Yukio Mishima was a Japanese writer, a very prominent, well-known Japanese writer at the time, who committed suicide. I think in this 1970. Um, his big book, his big book, might be the sailor who fell in love with the sea. I think it is the sailor who fell out of love with the sea, something like that. And then the Temple of the Golden Pavilion is another one of his famous books. And then the last thing he wrote, which is probably considered his masterpiece, which is the four-part series, The Sea of Fertility. And I've read most of what the man has published, at least that's available in English. Uh, Not everything has been translated, I believe, or at least, there are things which are difficult to come by. And this Star is one of the ones that had been difficult to come by, if at all. Now, what is he about? Well, Yukio Mishima was a very uh, viral kind of person. In addition to writing, he had a strong belief in physical fitness and old codes of Bushido and things of that nature. So he was very focused on Japan for Japan, not Japan for Western values and that sort of thing. So he wanted a pure, more natural, nationalistic Japan. And a lot of his books have a somewhat, edge of that kind of more, one might call it a somewhat conservative position on issues, a less Western focus. So one of his big books called Patriotism, one of his big short stories, excuse me, not books, called Patriotism, is about a guy who comes home from work. He has been fired or disgraced or something to that effect, and two-thirds of the book are essentially just a lengthy description of him committing harikari. And that's actually, in fact, how Mishima died. Basically, just about the time the last book came out, or just about the time the proofs of the last book were done, basically he was done with writing the fourth book of the Sea of Fertility trilogy. And that is when he did something like occupied a building and gave some political speeches and things of that nature, and then he cut himself up with a sword and had somebody else behead him or something. It was just awful, awful, awful craziness. And this is intended to be some kind of, protest against the government's increasing accommodation with the West. Let's look up real quick exactly what year that was. I said it was 1970, and that could be right, but I want to check. Yeah, November 25th, 1970. So yeah, this book, Star. Okay. Now what this book is about a star, not a in the sky star, but a public celebrity star. And this is about a movie star who begins to kind of, as this cover sort of kind of suggests, if you were to judge a book by its cover here, kind of begins to come apart, to fracture. And part of the problem here is he begins to have a lack of distinction between the real world and the world in the movies. The world in the movies, the world on screen, on stage, it becomes the world for him that he feels is real. His name is Rikio, and he is young, hot, viral, all those kinds of things. So in this case, he kind of sort of as a stand-in a little bit for kind of how Mishima might have seen himself. or Yukio might have seen himself. I'm not. I believe Mishima would be his first name, but it's kind of confusing sometimes with Japanese authors, which is the name they're mostly known by. Um, in any case, Rikio, he's hot, he's viral. All the young women are all about him. Oh, marry me, oh, blah blah blah. He gets mailed erotic fan fiction and marriage is a proposal and all kind of things like this all the time. But yet, the woman that he himself is involved with is a woman in the book who is described quite deliberately in terms of less than attractive. And there's sort of a situation going on here where that's the woman who I guess he sees as being able to see the real him, as he's being able to see as real. And all of the beauty and all of the glitter and glitz and stuff, it just isn't as real for him. Okay, and to some extent, not a whole lot happens here, except a sort of a psychological exploration of this character as he's filming this movie. And this movie is being filmed out of sequence. And this is sort of, so he's got to put himself in the space of, okay, this morning when this happens. And he's got to put himself in, the afternoon when this happens. And he's got to put himself here. And the scene is filmed once, it's filmed again, it's filmed again, it's filmed numerous times. And his makeup, the woman that he's involved with is actually his makeup artist. His makeup artist has to do his makeup so it looks like this and looks like that. And of course, he's not getting a lot of sleep because these are long days, and so makeup's being applied to falsify him as even more beautiful than he really is. So sort of an edge of kind of appearance versus reality, sort of a Dorian Gray kind of, this is him for the mass consumption, but is it really him? But then there's also this reversal that begins to happen, that he sees this as more him because, well, he's got to be this in order to make the movie. And so he becomes that. Okay, and this reaches us ahead where a fan somehow manages to sneak onto the stage. An actress fan manages to sneak onto the stage, and the sound stage. And as the film is being made, she jumps out and hugs him, and it becomes part of that take. And at first, the director is furious because this is not the direction he wanted things to go. But this director is a director who kind of, incorporates the random, incorporates different stuff into his style. And so the director gets this inspiration to have this character actually happen. And so they try to film it with this actress playing this role, but she can never capture the vitality that they saw in her honest portrayal. She can never act up to the potential. And so they eventually cut it, they tell her she's terrible, and she goes off, and bad things happen to her. But he goes on making this movie, and he goes on with his fractured self, and that is the whole point of this little short, almost vignette novella. It's 94 pages long. I think it took me, a little over an hour, maybe 2 hours to read it, and that was not even trying to push, just trying to push reading it, just reading it, and straightforward, pretty enjoyable little just look at something. And if you want to get a sense of some of Mishima's style without getting too deeply into his books, this might be one way to go. Now, in 2 weeks, I'm be looking at a different not 2 weeks, in a month, I'm be looking at another one of his novels, a slightly longer one, but also one that I'm not familiar with. So, and if you guys want, I can look at more Mishima. I'm not opposed to that. As a matter of fact, I'm not really sure, other than the Proust, which I am enjoying, and I hope you are too. I'm not really sure what books I'm going to do outside of that. I would say easily twice the number of books just sitting around at home than I would need to fill up an entire year of doing this. Probably I have 2 or 3 years, maybe even more, worth of books at home. So I'm not going to be hurting for that. So if you have ideas or something you particularly want me to look at, let me know. So anyway, so yeah, would I recommend this? Yeah, quick, easy, not difficult, straightforward. Um, just basically about these ideas of who are we, who is the real person, because all of us in our daily lives go around acting. Now we may not be acting to the extent that this guy is acting, but then here what's going on here is this is a look at what celebrity is in our celebrity culture and what a star is in our current culture and how they become fractured human beings and have no relationship to reality. We've all seen people, for instance, who relates more to, say, Jim Parsons, the guy who plays Sheldon Cooper on The Big Bang Theory, who think that that's actually who Jim Parsons is. Jim Parsons may or may not know physics. He probably doesn't. He's certainly not some socially stunted guy such as we see there. Uh, but that is a character that he played so believably, he fell into so well, that there are people who may think that that's who he really is. And the same thing is true of any number of people who have played in iconic roles. Think of James Kirk, William Shatner. William Shatner is and always will be James Kirk, or even better, Leonard Nimoy and Spock. Leonard Nimoy could never get out from under Spock in his later acting career. That was always the highlight. And this happens over and over and over again with Hollywood figures and will continue to do so because what we're seeing, the public persona, is so powerful. And even someone like, say, take Taylor Swift, take someone like Donald Trump. These are public personas. These are celebrity stars out there. Now, granted, Taylor Swift is not in movies. She's out there singing music. And granted, Donald Trump is not making movies. He's out there doing his political things. But still, there's a sense in which they are not real. That who is the real person behind the scenes? Well, to some extent, we're never going to know. Because what we want to consume, what we want to believe in, is this image. And when you're dealing with a celebrity, a movie star celebrity, it's particularly poignant because they are forever young. Take someone like James Dean, for instance. James Dean, forever young. And he's not just forever young because he died. Of course, that plays a role in that forever youngness. We don't have a 60, 70-year-old doddering old man acting or having retired from acting or directing movies or whatever else he may have gone on to do. All we have is the young James Dean. But still, that young James Dean always lives in those movies. And you can see this in something like a star that has in fact aged, but yet it is the young star that is in the imagination. William Shatner comes to mind, again, because it is really the Kirk of those 3 seasons of Star Trek on TV, or maybe the Kirk of the first and second Star Trek movies that really are the essence of who he is. Or, if you go back further in cinematic history, you have someone like Orson Welles and his portrayal of Kane in Citizen Kane. That is a portrayal that has lived. And that character is the character when you think of Welles that you think of. Or Anthony Perkins in Psycho. Again, that's the image you think of. You don't think of Perkins in any other kind of role that he may have had. You think of him as that character at that moment, that iconic character. And of course, there are any number of these. Every character in Pulp Fiction has this kind of iconic figure fix too, and so do so many, many, many others. And then sometimes it happens twice. Like take someone like Marlon Brando. Twice, talk about 3 times. He had his young persona in like On the Waterfront and movies of that character, Streetcar Named Desire, and then he had a sort of his Godfather figurine, and his, make you a deal you can't refuse kind of guy. And then you have the character from Apocalypse Now and his kind of crazed, is it Kurtz? I think Kurtz, in the jungle of Africa. So, Vietnam. That's Vietnam. Africa in the book, which it's from, which is Heart of Darkness. But the movie switches it to Vietnam because Vietnam was more pertinent at the time. But the whole point of both of those is it's a dark interior that twists the soul of man, and that is what you see there. That's what the book is about, and that's what the movie's about. But anyway, but the point is that, you know, we get these iconic moments of these celebrities, and it's difficult to see them for who they really are. And that is the thing that Mishima is looking at here, but from the inside, from a character who himself had become so sleep deprived, to become so involved and so method acted oriented in what he is doing, that he himself loses his own identity in this public persona. So, that's Star by Yukio Mishima. Let's see when this thing was published, so we'll know. It was published in English in 2019. And I'm not immediately seeing the Japanese publication date, but I'll put that in the description of this video, but I don't see it here. I'll have to look it up. All right, that's it for today.